Thank you for joining us today, everyone. Unfortunately, Harish Srinivasan will not be joining us. He had a scheduling conflict and is currently on a plane to London. In his place, my name is Sean Nicholson. This is Alex Mandernack. We are both security solution architects with Qualis, and we'll be going over today the 360-degree approach to securing your cloud workloads and assets. So what is a 360-degree approach? That encompasses 4 pillars when you're talking about security in the cloud. Number one is your assets, or your instances, sorry. You got to secure your instances, you got to secure your cloud infrastructure, you have to do web application scanning, and you also have to look at securing your container build pipelines. So the migration is on. As companies embrace the cloud, embrace container security, the pace is only quickening. 2018's seen a lot of gains in this space. I think 2019 is going to show even more. So the DevOps people are, it's all the rage right now. Everything's DevOps, DevSecOps. How do we go bigger, faster? How do we automate? How do we do integrations? So what we need to look at is how do we put security into that? How do we plug security into these build pipelines? How do we work to partner with these DevOps people to not be roadblocks, to not stand in their way, to help them go fast, but go fast while being secure at the same time? So we're going to cover, like I said before, vulnerability management, web application scanning, as well as compliance checks and configuration assessments. So here's your typical DevOps flow. You have your developer. They're committing their code into either Artifactory or GitHub. From there, Jenkins, Bamboo, other CI tools will sit there and take these, the code that they check in. They'll create the web applications, and then these are basically deployed using your orchestration engines, whether that's Kubernetes or Puppet or Ansible. So how do we plug into this? So the first thing is your security tool set needs to have APIs. You've got to have actionable information. You got to have real-time feedback and real-time results. You can't sit here and wait for security to run a scan and then say, hey, I'll get you the results tomorrow. Most of your DevOps pipeline or your DevOps engineers are going to say, you're too slow, you're standing in my way. So we have to empower them to move as fast as they want, but as I said before, securely. So how do we do that? So Qualis today is, many of you probably have us on-prem. We set the standard in vulnerability management in the early 2000s, and we've only continued today to evolve that offering, not just vulnerability management and policy compliance, but also we now have 18 different security applications covering almost the entire security landscape. So this comes in a single pane of glass, a single API. We have various sets of sensors. Many of you are familiar with what we do. So in the cloud, the biggest thing is the shared security model. In the end, you're responsible for securing your instances. You're responsible for securing your data, securing your networks, and setting up access. Qualis can help you do that by providing visibility into not just the workloads, but as I said, the cloud infrastructure, as well as the web application scanning, web application firewall. We now offer file integrity monitoring, as well as indicators of compromise. And we do this with our 5 sensors. So it starts in the middle here with the cloud connector. The first piece of security is visibility. If you don't have visibility into what you have, how can you tell if it's secure? How can you ensure that it's compliant? How can you ensure that your governance is being adhered to? So our cloud connector works via the AWS API. You set up a cross-account role. That role trusts our AWS account, and then from there, with the security audit policy, we're able to provide visibility into what you're doing in AWS. As you move to the left on this slide, we have our cloud agent, which the cloud agent can be deployed or baked into your instances and your workloads. This, at the time of launch, will begin reporting back to the Qualys platform, and then from there, you can have visibility into how these instances are configured. We also have our virtual scanner appliance, which is pre-authorized by AWS to perform your scanning of your VPCs or your networks and can be deployed easily from the AWS store. As you move to the right on this slide, we have internet scanners. So we host our own scanners that you can utilize to scan your environment from the perimeter to get an idea of, what does your network look like to a hacker? How do you how do you address the vulnerabilities that are publicly available? And then we also have web application scanning. How secure are your applications? How secure are your APIs? We can provide you visibility into that as well. So just reiterating here, we have vulnerability management. We offer policy compliance. We also do web application security scanning, API security, and we provide this via one platform, one API. You don't have to go to 18 different vendors to solve 18 different problems. You can do it with us with just one. So I'll be covering today 2 customer use case stories. If any of you have stopped by the booth, we've already talked about Capital One, but I'll go a little bit more in depth on that, as well as a software maker. So Capital One had an AMI approval process that used to take 2 weeks. It was very manual in the way it was done. It was emails and spreadsheets and dev teams interfacing with security. You know, hey, I launched this new instance or this new build, can you scan it? They'd wait a day or 2 to get the results back, and then it was just a very iterative process that was not very efficient and took way too long. So their DevOps teams basically started to resist security and said, you're slowing us down way too much. So to address this problem, Capital One partnered with Qualis, and they developed what they call their AMI bakery. So this process, they have their DevOps teams deployed to specific VPCs. In those VPCs, they have pre-deployed Qualys scanners. They are able to queue up scans via the APIs. So no longer was the DevOps team going to security and saying, hey, can you do this? They're doing it all through integrations and automations. They were able to get the results back in near real time. They could address any of the vulnerability findings. They could address the configuration compliance issues. And then once they were able to pass the gates that were agreed upon by the DevOps team and the security team to adhere to the governance, those images would then be approved. As a part of that approval process and that hardening, they would then deploy all the agents they needed to it. So, you know, we don't operate in a bubble here. The Qualys agent was one of them, but they might also have a Splunk agent or, you know, another agent from another product or monitoring solution. So after these after these instances are hardened and approved, they're then deployed out to all of their AWS accounts. So they can then use this to populate elastic environments, to deploy images to other dev teams, or, you know, deploy them in any way they see fit. So at that point, they're deploying pre-hardened, pre-configured instances that are compliant with all of their internal governance, and then the Qualys agent would begin reporting back to the Qualys platform, and they would have visibility in their account of not just where they were deployed, how they were configured, but they can also track this over time. So if they're deploying instances that may not be getting recycled daily, you know, they could be in an elastic environment that's on a monthly build cycle. So they would have visibility into the running instance vulnerability standpoint and compliance posture via the cloud agent, and then also provide this visibility back to the dev team. So if things did come out with their production instances, they could be addressed in the build pipelines. Now, the key takeaway here is they took a process that took more than 2 weeks that was manual, emails, spreadsheets, and they reduced it to less than 24 hours. And that's not just 24 hours of, oh, hey, let's go get this done. This is 24 hours of their developers getting real-time feedback to address these issues and build pipeline and not slow them down. They were able to move at the DevOps speed they wanted to, and at the same time do it securely. The next one I'm going to talk about here is a security as a service. This goes back to one of the tenets of you need to make security self-service for DevOps people. You need to make it not so much cumbersome, but allow them to have it as they need. So this software maker, they worked basically doing rendering. So as a part of the construction industry, they'd come back and say, hey, we need this 3D render, you know, for this specific blueprint or something like that. So the company had an automation process in place that would spin up hundreds of workloads to do these large-scale renderings. And at the same time, they wanted to ensure that when these instances were online, that they were being scanned and they were secure. So they developed an integration with ServiceNow that allowed their DevOps engineers to submit tickets in ServiceNow. Those tickets would kick off a workflow that would trigger a scan via the Qualys API, provide the results back to an S3 bucket. The ticket would then have a link to the S3 bucket put in it and closed out. So the DevOps team could go into the ticket, get the link to where the results were, remediate them as they see fit, or, you know, alter their build pipelines, or make sure this stuff was taken care of prior to the next scale up to ensure they were secure at all times. This really helped them reduce the friction between security and DevOps because, again, we weren't being roadblocks. We were helping them move at the speed they needed to move. So here's our EC2 dashboard that you can get inside the Qualys portal. This will provide you real-time visibility via either the scan results, the Qualys Cloud Agent, or the cloud inventory scanning via the cloud connector to provide you visibility not just internally but externally. So we can show you, hey, here's all your internal workloads, here's their vulnerabilities. Here's your external workloads, here's those vulnerabilities. We take that a step further with our vulnerability dashboard to allow you to create customized widgets. So you can create specific widgets for lines of businesses, business units, specific dev teams, and then provide these customized dashboards back to them so that they can have the visibility via the UI or via the API. We just recently added our cloud perimeter scan. So if you have our EC2 connector or our Cloud View connector in place already, you can queue up an automated scan using our internally hosted scanners to say, what does my cloud perimeter look like, without having to keep track of it yourself. Via the cloud agent, via the cloud connector, we keep track of which of your agents have public IPs, which ones are publicly available via the security groups, and you can launch an automated, unauthenticated scan against them to get that external view. You can also add in manually the ELB addresses so that we can scan the instances past the ELB. We will soon be automating this piece. So how many of you here have to deal with compliance frameworks? Pretty much everyone's hand goes up. So we recently added, as a part of our cloud agent, a file integrity monitoring solution. So pretty much all of these frameworks up here have a file integrity monitoring requirement. So this is yet again another example of consolidating vendors and consolidating tools. Why deploy additional agents for point solutions when you can add them into your existing subscription? If you're already using us for vulnerability management or policy compliance, we can now offer file integrity monitoring. We also have pre-canned, out-of-the-box policy compliance templates for GDPR. We also offer what we call our security assessment questionnaire. This allows you to create questionnaires specifically to keep track of your vendor security. So you can keep track of all of this, again, in a single platform and provide this to your auditors when it comes time to prove that you're GDPR compliant. As I had mentioned earlier, we have web application scanning. So we built a browser extension for Chrome. This allows you to record how to interact with your web application, so you can basically create customized scanning. You feed the data from the browser extension into our web application scanner, and you can scan your web applications for vulnerabilities, code issues, things like that, specifically things like the OS top 10, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, things like that. We also have the ability for you to load a Swagger file. If you want to test out your APIs, make sure your APIs are secure, make sure you don't have any vulnerabilities there. We offer that today as well. So just to sum this all up, we offer a security platform. It's not a point solution, it's not a single product, but it's a security platform that can address many of your security requirements, including governance, policy compliance, vulnerability management, file integrity monitoring. Excuse me, sorry, dry throat. I'm in from the East Coast and this dry weather's been killing me. So our API, we offer integrations with some of our partners such as Illumio, such as Puppet, ServiceNow, and Splunk. We actually have a technology add-on in the Splunk store that you can deploy and immediately begin taking in events from the Qualys API. Recently announced, we are now in the AWS Marketplace. You can purchase us there, purchase these services for configuration compliance, vulnerability management, and just announced yesterday is container security, all through the AWS Marketplace. And then I believe at 12:30 today, they announced that we were also a partner with the AWS Security Hub. So you can feed your vulnerability and compliance data directly into the AWS Security Hub. So if you have teams or your DevOps engineers that are dead set on using AWS's UI, you can take our data and feed that in to empower them that way, so they don't have to work on existing integrations or make additional automations. And with that, I'll hand over to Alex Manderneck, who's going to talk to you guys about cloud infrastructure.
Hi, everyone. How many of you are using containers today? Quite a few. What I'd like to share with you today is a customer story. We had a customer who's an Australian insurance company. They received an email from AWS one day stating that they had security keys that were being used to attempt to create accounts in an EU region. So they began doing an investigation. They came up with a plan to try and stop this, figure out what happened. They needed to identify where their deployments are supposed to happen. Is it supposed to happen in the EU region? Turns out it's not. They needed to determine what S3 buckets were publicly readable. They needed to be able to fix that. They needed to be able to ensure best practices were being followed for their IAM users and their keys. There it goes. So simply put, what do they need to do? They need to secure against misconfigurations. They need to secure against malicious behavior. And they need to secure against non-standard deployments. So what does Qualys do for this? Well, we have a solution. We have a product that's called Cloud View. Cloud View is an umbrella that really is two different modules. Cloud Inventory, where you're able to get an inventory of all the assets and resources in your cloud account, and Cloud Security Assessment, where you can scan those against the CIS benchmark for AWS, as well as our own written best practices. I'm actually going to hand it back to Sean now to show a demo of how easy it is to set this up.
Hopefully the demo gods shine on me today. Okay, so here we have your typical AWS portal. We have a role set up. I'm already logged into the Qualys portal, so here's what CloudView looks like. It gives you a breakdown of your various services. It gives you a regional distribution. You can see, what type of controls are what type of controls are failing, and then we give you a top 5 controls down here. So adding a connector is super simple. We come in here, we say create connector. We give it a name. We'll call this one reinvent. We come down here, we have the Qualys account ID already pre-populated, an external ID pre-populated. I paste in my ARN here, and then I say create connector. So we'll let that go. It should only take about 10 to 15 seconds, but just to kind of show you guys here, we're using the security audit policy. This is an out-of-the-box AWS policy for read-only access. We're not doing anything custom here, though we may be adding some custom stuff in the future, especially as we start talking about auto remediation and things like that. But we come back here, I'm going to refresh the page, and you can already see we're starting to see regions being scanned, we're seeing resources being discovered. We've already seen in 15 seconds, 176 resources discovered. This is very fast, it's quick, provides great visibility into what you're doing in AWS, and it gives you a resource map here. When these come up, you can filter by a specific account, you can filter by a specific service, you can filter by a specific region. So here's the one I just added, and it's already showing me results as far as failed controls go, which is just super fast. With that, I'll hand it back to Alex, and we'll have another demo here in just a few minutes. Thank you, everyone.
So as you've seen how easy it is to get this set up, how quick it is to get that data, we worked with this Australian insurance company, and we were able to provide them very quickly the visibility into their public cloud. They were able to see what resources, what assets they had, where they were located. They were able to determine where deployments were happening that they weren't supposed to be. They were able to, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself on the slides there. They are moving. Through the map that Sean just showed you, they were able to visually see where these assets were located. They were able to identify the teams that were deploying them, and they were able to stop it. The second thing that they needed to do was identify the misconfigured S3 buckets. They were able to use the Qualys query language to identify buckets that had public read enabled, where they should not be. In this instance, they had keys that were stored in this bucket, publicly accessible, and that's where the compromise happened. We also have a CSA check specifically for this, so very quickly you can see with an alert that you have a publicly readable S3 bucket. The third thing they needed to do was detect compromised IAM users. So in doing this, they needed to be able to check for quite a few different things, rotation of keys, make sure that keys were not being used in the wrong places. So to wrap this all together, what they really needed to do was get the visibility of the deployments and stop the misuse of the keys. So we gave them visibility. We gave them the controls they needed to detect the S3 buckets that were publicly readable and resolve that. And we also detected the IAM users and the keys and ensure that they were following best practices. So the best part about this, the inventory piece of this is free. You can sign up today. You can get the inventory piece. You saw how quick it was. 15 seconds, you can start to see where things are located. So I'll hand it back to Sean now to do the second part of the demo.
So visibility, like I said before, if you don't have visibility, how do you know anything's secure? How do you know you're adhering to your governance or your policies? We take that a step further with our cloud security assessment, which is the second half of CloudView. So Cloud Security Assessment scans your AWS account against the CIS Foundation's benchmarks for account security. We also add in some customized checks around S3 and other industry best practices. We'll be expanding these controls over the coming months and quarters to include pretty much every service that we're looking to scan. There's a best practice out there. We also allow you the ability to dive in using our Qualys query language via the resource view within Cloud View. So you can do queries like, show me this instance, show me, is it vulnerable? You can also say, is it publicly exposed? Show me what security groups are assigned to it. And so one of the second demos I'm going to show you here is, it's very common for people when they're deploying stuff to just go, I'm just testing this real quick. I'm going to just put it up there, create a new security group, which is like the default when you're deploying something via the UI is SSH open everywhere. So we have that as a control already. So if that does happen, you'll get visibility into it. And what the next iteration here is, which is what I'm about to show you, is auto-remediating this. So it's ensuring that things happen within the governance policies that you have created. So here, we have our Cloud View listing. Hold on. Under monitor. I got a filter by the account here. So here's my account that I had set up just recently. We go down to control 41 here, and it says, oh, I have 3 security groups that have failed this control. Come in here. I can add in via the query language if I want to failed, but I'm just going to go down here. Where is it? Here it is. So here's my failure right there. Somebody created a security group as they were launching a new instance, opening up SSH to the world. We'll go back here. And I click on evidence here, it shows it. So what we have is we're going to integrate a way to basically create an SNS notification from the Qualys platform. The SNS notification will fire off whenever it detects one of these misconfigurations or something outside of your security governance, and then that can trigger a Lambda function. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just doing it via the script. And of course, there we go. They did not shine on me the second time. So here it goes, the script's running, basically pulls back from our API, says here's some security groups that are out of compliance, we're going to trigger a Lambda function, we'll go ahead and remove those, removing the faulty rule, wait for that to complete here, and then we come back over here and I can go in just as simply and refresh the screen, go to my inbound rules, that rule is now gone. So this is self-healing, self-fixing, preventing security issues before they happen, even if it's a typo, even if it's a mistake. Now we come back in here, I can reevaluate the control. It says, okay, that reevaluate request is underway. We'll give that about 10 or 15 seconds. But the main point I wanted to make here, just like I said, you can't wait to be reactive in security. You need to start being proactive. That's the biggest thing. I've worked with customers over the last probably 5 years, and I've seen a shift. Before, it was security is hands-off. We're auditors. We're just here to observe. Now it's with the implement of Chef, with the implement of Ansible, the implement of Puppet and other orchestration automation tools, I'm starting to see, well, if you detected it, why don't you fix it? Why do we have to wait till it becomes a problem? Just go ahead and do it. And especially if we do it in the dev pipelines, we don't have to worry about break in production. We already know that it's been taken care of. We already know that it doesn't cause an issue. So that shift in thinking needs to reflect your security tool set and goes back to that DevSecOps model. So let's go ahead and refresh this page here. And you'll notice they're all green now. And that quickly we were able to reevaluate, we were able to fix it, and this will be coming in the very near future to the Qualys platform. So I'll switch back here, again covering the misconfigured security groups. We just showed you how not just providing you the visibility, but very soon we'll provide you the ability to remediate this stuff automatically. So visibility into your public cloud, continuous security monitoring, actionable insight, actionable information to allow your security teams to partner with your DevOps engineers and reduce the barriers in between you. Don't be a roadblock. Don't be, don't be in the way. Let them move as fast as they want, but do it securely. I'm going to talk about over the next couple slides here some things that are coming in the very near future to the Qualys platform to enhance everything that we've talked about today. And the first one there is threat analysis. Now this is data event correlation. So I said a couple times, oh, I have an instance publicly available or I have an instance with vulnerabilities. I like to highlight the credit rating company, the Adobe Struts issue, or Apache Struts issue, where they had an instance publicly available that had a vulnerability, and that instance was compromised. But what they didn't see, or they didn't prevent, or didn't look for, was what did that instance have access to? And that instance had access to an S3 bucket. So even though that S3 bucket was following their security governance, not publicly accessible, locked down to specific instances or even specific accounts, because they had an external vulnerability that was compromised, that attacker was able to exfiltrate that data from that S3 bucket. So we'll provide you that level of visibility and correlation with inside the Qualys platform with our threat analysis. So we'll be able to tell you not just what's exposed, but what the vulnerabilities are, what the ports are, and then later down the line will be how do we automatically close those ports to prevent these from being exploited. That flows right into the remediation slide here. So this is a common diagram that you've probably seen if you've looked up anything on S3 remediation. I just added the little Qualys shield in there. But this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to insert ourselves in to auto-remediate things based on scan findings, based on these integrations and automations, and make your guys' lives easier. The next piece we're going to be adding is, we hear this a lot, well, how do you do PCI compliance reports in the cloud? This is a common thing amongst auditors. Or, how do I say that I'm HIPAA compliant in the cloud? We're going to be adding out-of-the-box CAN reporting. So if you have our sensors deployed, you have our virtual scanners deployed, you have our cloud connectors deployed, you can get these out-of-the-box compliance reports done to make your lives easier when it comes audit time. So just to reiterate, we provide comprehensive security. It's not a point solution. We're a security platform, and we're looking to expand that platform. We're at 18 applications today. By midway in 2019, I think we're going to be close to 21 or 22. We're going to be adding in passive network monitor to give you that IDS style, traffic analysis and anomaly detection. And we're also going to be adding in, we just launched into beta, patch management, which goes back to that remediation piece. If you find a vulnerability or you find a piece of software that needs to be patched, you can queue it up to be patched automatically via our API or via the UI. And with that, I'll hand it back to Alex to talk to you guys about container security.
Thank you. So I asked you guys earlier, how many of you use containers? Quite a few. There are a lot of challenges with containers. Understanding what images you have, understanding what vulnerabilities might be inside those images, what software is in those images. And this happens at the build phase, when you're designing how you're going to compose these images. So now you've got your image. Now you're looking to push it into a registry. Well, you need to scan that registry. At least you think you would. What's in that registry, what images, and you will then know what software, what vulnerabilities are contained inside of those images. And you also need to know at the run stage, how do I actually protect this host? At the OS level, at the engine level, how do I protect the containers that are running on this? What containers are running on this host? Qualys has a solution for this. We have a product called Qualys Container Security. We can insert ourselves at each of these phases. So at the build phase, we can do a software composition analysis. We can tell you and give you an inventory of what software is on these containers, what software is on these images. We can give you a vulnerability analysis. We can give you a software licensing analysis. And we can also integrate into your CI pipeline. So at the ship phase, we can also connect to your registry. We can scan it, give you that inventory, tell you what images are there, what software is on those images, what vulnerabilities are associated with those images, and of course, the licensing as well. And we also insert into the run phase. We have a sidecar container that will run on your Docker engine. That container can then look and see what containers are running. It can scan those containers. It'll tell you what software is on them, what vulnerabilities, and so on. So at a high level, what do? We provide that host protection. We're able to scan that host. We're able to tell you what vulnerabilities are associated with the software running on the host, the configuration of the OS, the configuration of the Docker engine, and we're also able to tell you or give you the scanning and compliance on your image or on your running containers. We give you that full visibility protection end to end. So simply put, we do discovery, vulnerability management, compliance, and runtime security in the container environment. If you have any questions, we'll be around at the podium afterwards. You can get further details. We're happy to speak with you. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone.